Hey everyone, welcome back to the FloTrack podcast. FloTrack podcast at gmail.com is our email address. FloTrack podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or you can watch the videos on FloTrack.org/FloTrack podcast. I'm Kevin. He's Lincoln. Gordon is not here. He's charging his computer, I think, for the last several days. Lincoln, what's going on?
Not a lot. Yeah, Gordon, his computer being at the beach, they didn't have any good outlets there last week, so he was a little incapacitated, but hopefully he's back to full strength by this week near some outlets. Full disclosure, my computer is at 73% right now, and I don't have it plugged in without a charger. So we're running the line. We're running a little risk here, but hopefully we can get today's episode done without me having to just be an avatar like Gordon was last week.
Decrease the brightness right now. Let's just go into energy saver mode right now. You don't need anything else open, and we will get through it. I enjoyed, and it wasn't just because Gordon only was on it for about 60%, but I enjoyed your guys' conversation with Josh Kerr and David Ribich that we posted yesterday. That was good.
Yeah, I think we had a fun time. They asked me some questions. We asked them. I think they were a little more open than maybe most athletes tend to be, just because they do host their own show, and so they're used to that, which was fun. It was fun to hear Josh talk about British. I'm still trying to get my hands or my head around, why we call it Great Britain, we call it the UK. He's talking about runners specifically from Scotland. And I can't figure out exactly what's going on. What's the difference between Great Britain and the United Kingdom? Can anyone explain that to me? I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, within Britain, you have Scotland, Wales, England, et cetera, right? So he's saying not only is Great Britain really strong right now in the 1500, but he's a smaller subset of that in Scotland, right? With all the Scottish athletes he was naming. I was intrigued by the 4x15. I didn't even think about the possibilities there, because Norway, you have to put them in the mix. Two of the Ingebrigtsens there are 1500 meter studs, and then you have another guy who can certainly hold his own. Then you just got to find a fourth person. The US would be in there. Kenya would be in there, and I think the UK, would that be it? I think that would be it, right? If it was a straight up
Ethiopia, maybe could field a team, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I mean, not any pure
find some 205 marathoner and be like, you're going to be in the 4x1500. You're not cutting in the marathon anymore.
Yeah. I mean, they got some steeplers and a couple 5K guys, so I mean, they could probably make it happen. But I think it comes down to Kenya versus the US and the UK. So I mean, he's got an argument that the United Kingdom and maybe just Scotland by itself could be just as good as or better than the US in the 1500, which is pretty impressive. And I don't know what we attribute that to, other than maybe track or athletics, as they call it over there. It's just a hair more popular relative to what it is in the US. So maybe they get the bigger concentration of athletes, but it is interesting, and he deserves the right to dance a little bit on the US because that shouldn't be the thing where Scotland could contend with the entirety of the United States in a 4x15 on the men's side.
Well, if you think about it, think of Jamaica versus the US in sprints. Did it ever make sense that Jamaica and the population that they have should be better than the US in sprinting? For all those years, it didn't make sense. It's a moment in time. I don't think long term it's going to be the case, but right now, he does have a good point. And I just like the fact that he doesn't hold back. Both those guys are very candid.
Yeah,
I like the Christian Serrato story. That was good.
Oh yeah, that was good. I forgot about that.
Yeah, there was a lot. I recommend people go listen to it, and I'm sure all of their episodes are probably really good. Sit and Kick.
Yeah,
podcast is the name of their show. Go back and listen, because they were just incredibly candid. They make fun of each other, which I thought brought a little more out of you, because then you started subtly dunking on Gordon every.
Oh yeah, was it subtle? I thought it was overt,
so?
but yeah.
Well, it started subtle, and then I think you called him overweight at one point, which was a little more direct.
Myself in there. Yeah, I put myself in there too. It
was good.
Yeah, we had a good time.
Yeah. Okay, we want to talk. It's Miler Week on the site, so we wanted to do a deep dive into one specific race in miling history. But before we do that,
is that a word?
It is, yes, it's a word. I made it a word.
Miling?
It is now.
Okay.
Before we do that, though, there's some news, Lincoln, that
Oh,
came
there
across
is.
the wire this morning. Oh, yes. I'm reading this from the World Athletics website. In what will be Germany's first professional spectator sporting event since the corona lockdown, a pole vaulting facility will be set up in the Otto Kino Dusseldorf, where 3 of the country's leading pole vaulters will compete surrounded by the spectators' cars. Germany's 2013 world champion Raphael Holzdeppe, 2019 World Championship 4th place finisher Bo Candalita Bere, and World University Games silver medalist Torben Blech will be taking part.
Oh, who could
Spectators could
forget?
watch the action unfold right in front of them, or if they prefer, on the big cinema screen. Naturally, protective measures will be observed. A pole vault competition at a drive-in movie theater. What's not to
The
like?
pole vault has never gotten more attention. If we're doing it at winners and losers of the sports lockdown, pole vault is a winner. It's gotten more attention than it's ever gotten in the last 3 months, just simply off of, I guess, its accessibility or your ability to do this with social distancing, I guess. What do I think of this? I mean, yeah, this is a commitment. I know Germany has been able to open a bit because of the the good measures they took in the wake of the beginning of the outbreak. But I don't know what my reaction is to this, other than I don't know. Good on them for trying to catch on to the pole vault trend that's currently going on with these garden clashes. But now we have a drive-in clash. Do you get does a bellhop with a mask and gloves come to your car with rollerblades and take your order? Like, it seems like it's like 1950 track and field.
You turn the radio on to listen. Just as
Yeah.
pole vault is able to succeed during this time, so are drive-in movie
Mm-hmm.
theaters. I've been reading
Making a
about that just
comeback.
in general. They've been able to make a comeback here. So you have the marriage of two things that are able to function during a global pandemic. Have you been to a drive-in movie before, or are you
I
too
mean,
young for that?
if I have, it's been a very long time ago. I think of them now as it's like a romantic thing, right? You take like a date
Mm-hmm.
to it, and that's not anything I would have done as a kid, or probably even as an adult. But um, so first
Well, we used to
date. I
go. We
mean,
used to go
what's
as
this?
groups.
Oh, okay.
We used to go as groups because on Tuesdays it was family night, and a bunch of people from work would pile
Oh,
in cars, and you'd pay
wow.
some obscenely low amount of money, and then some people would hide in the trunk of cars and cover blankets over themselves so they could pay even less money. And then you got out
Wow.
of the car. You brought lawn chairs, basically. You brought out a car. You got out of the car, brought lawn chairs. Everybody had their radios on because that's how you listen to the movie, and you'd sit there and watch it. Now, this was Las Vegas in the summer, so even at night it was about 98 degrees, and I
Mm-hmm.
was getting up very early to run before work. I was working at a pool as a lifeguard, so I'd make it about 45 minutes in every movie and fall asleep in a lawn chair without fail because it was just so
Nice.
warm and it put me right to
Were
sleep.
these were these new movies, or re-airing old
Yes,
movies, or new
new
movies?
movies, and it was,
Yeah.
yeah, and it was if I'm remembering correctly, they were all double features too. So if you didn't
Oh,
mind the low
wow.
quality, you were getting a good deal. You were getting a very good deal. The problem was the you were sitting in a lawn chair, and in my case, you were falling asleep very shortly after the thing started. But they were actual
Mm-hmm.
movies. You'd look up and you got to pick from your screens, right? There were 3 or 4 screens out there, and we'd always vote each week and go out there. Now, would I be able to get people to go out and watch pole vaulting in the same manner? Probably not. Probably not.
I mean, it's not going to be a good move if they got a bunch of Kevin Solis in the crowd and people are passed out in their cars while this is one of the first spectator sports since March. So we'll hope
Would you
for
do this right
better.
now, though? If in Austin, Texas, right now, you could drive down and watch some pole vaulting, I would do it. I would 100% do it from my
You
car.
think? Okay. Yeah.
Well, depending on what time of day, because you don't have
Hmm.
AC in your car, as we've talked about
Well, I
here.
wouldn't.
So
I wouldn't take my Yaris. I would take the other car that does have AC. But yeah,
you take
the Yaris would be torture.
at night, cool temperatures. It's lit really well. I would watch it from the confines of my car.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
haven't spent that much time in my car. My car and I need to
Yeah.
get reacquainted.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, okay. I'm committed to this if it makes its way across the pond from Germany. We'll see how this one goes. When is this event?
This is coming soon. It is, let's see, I put the,
To theaters near you, pole vault.
yeah, it's, I want to say June,
Oh, June.
but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm not sure.
Okay.
Look, Impossible Games still on the schedule for
June.
June
Yeah.
11th. We get to see the strobe light pacer. We get to see Warholm run the 300 hurdles. I'm excited. We get
No,
to see
that one's going to be fun. I mean,
Ingebrigtsens maybe run. Ingebrigtsens are supposed to be running tomorrow in some road event, right?
right. Yeah. I'm excited about that. I'm a little more excited for that than this German drive-in pole vault, but I, who knows? I mean, the pole vault has surprised me during this period. How exciting it can
Mm-hmm.
be, even when these pros are jumping heights that they can like kind of scissor kick over. It's maybe this betters the Ingebrigtsens doing a family time trial, but I'm as it stands right now, I'm more looking forward to seeing what the brothers can do, and maybe it's time for Henrik to make a comeback. I mean, think about that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if Henrik gets a W tomorrow, that could change our entire understanding of the Britsons, because right now the pecking order pretty clear: Jakob, Philip, and Henrik, and maybe Henrik's tired of that.
Yeah, you're right. That is exciting, but I'm not going to turn my nose up at a Raphael Holdsdeppy Torben Blech matchup. I'm just not going to. I'm not gonna
Yeah,
turn away from that,
there
Lincoln. I'm gonna lean
there
right
are
in.
there are certain things that you can't, and that's one of them. And I've always said that about if these guys match up in a drive-in during a pandemic type of a situation, I'm not gonna, like you said, turn my nose up at it. And so for that to finally come to fruition, I have to deliver on my promise about that. So
They've been ducking each other for too long.
yeah,
Now
yep.
finally we get answers to questions. And don't count out Bo Kenda Litabere in this, because BKLB
Mm-hmm.
is a stud. I mean, he has a history of drive-in movie. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about
Mm-hmm.
with him.
Couldn't keep that bit going.
No,
No.
I was gonna make some drive-in movie joke, but I don't know how drive-in movies are perceived in Germany. Let's
Yeah.
talk about the mile. You ready for the
Okay.
mile?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Yes. As the ticker on the bottom of the screen, if you're watching on FloTrack, says, what was the most memorable mile/1500 meter race of all time? And we want to do a deep dive into one that probably our audience doesn't spend a whole bunch of time rewatching, but the historians out there know about it. I'm, of course,
Yep.
speaking about the 1954 British Empire Commonwealth Games in
So official.
Vancouver, British Columbia. The date, Lincoln, August 7th, 1954. Roger Bannister, fresh off, breaking 4 minutes in the mile against John Landy, the Australian, who took Bannister's world record from him, went
Yep.
357.9 in Finland, got rounded up to 358, but had the record by over a second, and they got to square off in this race. When you saw the video, when you saw the pictures, what jumped out at you first? What made you want to do a thorough analysis of this race?
Well, I mean, the first thing that stands out is that the stadium is absolutely packed. It says the attendance everywhere you read is 35,000 people, but if you would have told me 100,000, I would have believed that, because it's body to body people, which watching that now, even in black and white, you're like, oh my god, what are they doing? And but you realize that's post traumatic stress of the situation we're in right now. But this was, I mean, to me, one of the biggest sporting events in the world, the biggest mile ever at the time. Roger
Mm-hmm.
Bannister's name still today means something in the mile, and John Landy's less so, but just because he had the unfortunate thing of coming second after Roger Bannister as far as breaking 4 in the mile. But this was a huge matchup back then. And I think given the significance we still give to Bannister for being the first, it still has massive significance. And not just that, it was a great race and a lot of people were watching.
Yeah. How many did they say tuned in worldwide via radio and television? It was millions of people that were tuning in to this event. So if you haven't seen it and you want to participate with this podcast, which I feel like you should, watch the race. You can find it on YouTube. A surprisingly high quality video of this thing exists.
I mean, really
on YouTube.
really high quality. Yeah.
Yeah, watch it. You can read all about it, and then we'll break it down here. But it's important to know the subtext and what came before. As I mentioned, Bannister only had that record for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? And that doesn't get written about much in the record books. Landy was younger. If you haven't read The Perfect Mile by Neil Bascombe, I highly recommend it. It's good background information for this race, because that was really about Landy, Bannister, and an American, Wes Santee, trying to be the first person. There was this race to be the first to break 4, and information back in the 50s spread much slower than it did now, and it was fascinating to see these guys all try to achieve the same goal and try to be the first to do it, and hearing about the others. But this was the first matchup between the two of Landy and Bannister, and Landy wasn't a fan of rabbits, and we know that Bannister broke 4 on the Iffley Road track with the help of pacers, but Landy wanted to do it solo, or he wanted to do it authentically. And in that race in Finland, when he ran
the charged word there.
What's that? Which
authentically?
One?
Authentically, a charged word. You're saying
well,
Rogers wasn't? Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, I'm saying he wanted to do it in the confines of 100% pure race, no time trials. Now, today, if someone broke a record with a rabbit, we'd say, "Oh, that's how you break a record with a rabbit. That's part of the toolkit that you use."
No.
In the race in Finland, when Landy broke the world record, he did have people, I think, at least for the first 400, go out hard. But he had this quote from 2004 where he said, my point is, people say, would you have done it that way? Talking about pacing. The answer is no. I wanted to run the 4-minute mile myself, and I never saw it as a team business. Even though I had some very good teammates and wanted to pace me, I wanted to do it myself. So it's just important subtext there going in.
Just a bad take overall, but that's fine. I respect him. I respect his craft. I think he's wrong there, but I don't know why tactical races and rabbits get such a bad rap. When I understand he comes from a different era, but you're still running the race. It's just like, that's like saying like, well, it would be sure nice to train with people, but that actually helps me. And I would like for my job to be harder because that makes me feel better about myself. So I'm gonna just train by myself. I mean, it's just like it's punishment to the point of overdoing it, I think. But different era.
This was the breaking 2 debate of the time. This is what they talked about instead of talking about the lasers on the car and the pacers coming in and out. But this was hyped. This was hyped because you had a clash of styles, Lincoln. Yeah. You had Bannister, the guy who could close, Landy, the pure front runner. It was called the Miracle Mile, the Mile of the Century, and everybody's watching. Everybody's watching because the mile was hot. It was in.
Yeah. No, it's you couldn't ask for much better. I mean, I try to think of an equivalent now, and you obviously couldn't because not many people, without it being a World Championships or actually like an Olympics. I mean, you just couldn't get this much of a match race situation between people now. I don't know what it would be. I mean, Timothy Chariot, for how great he is, he's never going to be as famous as Roger Bannister, and probably the same for even Matthew Centrowitz here, even though he's pretty famous in the United States. We're not going to probably see this again, but the equivalent would be if those two guys, I guess, if Chariot broke the mile world record, so if he ran 3:43 low or whatever, what it ran 3:42, and then somebody else will say Centrowitz broke it, and then those guys met a few weeks later in a very high stakes race, and they both committed to it being fast. It's like not only are they going to meet up to declare who the world's best miler is, but they're also going to do it in a way that, the winner is going to end up running a fast time. I mean, they both ran fast. They both broke 4. First ever race where 2 guys broke 4, but it's just something that is so foreign now, just because of how selective we are with races, of course. And world records don't get set very often. And so we were at this new thing where these guys had arrived that were capable of running 4, of which it was thought to be impossible. And now we would think of, running 3:43 is almost impossible, even though we've seen it in the 90s with Hickam El Guerrouj. That's how it was. I mean, it's like these guys doing something that I think we thought was was beyond human abilities, and 2 guys doing it at the same time to declare the world's best miler. The stakes couldn't have been much higher.
Yeah, and also, I don't know if they knew this at this time, but that was Bannister's last year, pretty running seriously for the most part.
Apex,
and then Landy
Bannister.
And then Landy went to 56. That was it. 1950. He only went 2 years more, and then left competitive running. I think they thought this might be the one and only time that we run, and it turned out to be absolutely correct. That was the one and only time that they raced. It wasn't like a situation where you'll see them 6 times in the circuit the next year. This reminded me, in a way, when you're just talking about pure match race, of the Donovan Bailey, Michael Johnson 150. But that was a little bit of a different element, because one was the gold medalist in one event, and then the other one was the gold medalist in the different event, and then they met in the middle. But just the head-to-head, larger-than-life feel, and again, I was not there in 1954, but just from rewatching the broadcast, the way they're positioning it, it's the most important thing that's ever happened on the face of the earth when it comes to sports, the way they're talking about it.
Yeah. And let's knock the elephant out of the room here. Let's set the stage. We get to the start line, and 2 of the competitors, not Bannister or Landy, but they start in a sprinter's position. No amount of reporting research would ever satisfy me to understand, to go into the psyche of those 2 guys. One of them is a pacer, but if you, like we said at the top, you got to watch this to really get into what we're talking about.
Is he a pacer though?
He goes immediately to the front. And do we think it's from his starting position that he starts? Did these guys request blocks and they were not provided for them? Because you're like, oh, I'm about to watch a race on the start line, and all of a sudden 2 guys go down into this set position, and then there's no drive phase. You don't think they didn't think to themselves, like, this was kind of pointless because I immediately stood up? Like, who told them
pre-block? Wasn't this the pre-blocks era though? Almost.
No, was it?
Where you I'm not 100% sure when blocks were. Well, I'm trying to think of. Certainly by the 60s that they were around. I'm not sure, but I just remember the videos of people digging holes with the trowel and then putting your feet in. No, I don't think those guys were rabbits. I mean, these were the Commonwealth Games. These weren't.
Okay, yeah, I guess you're right. With what Landy was saying, that wouldn't make sense. But the one guy just shot immediately to the front and had no chance.
Well, it's his start. That's his start. That dude owned the first 50 meters. That was his calling card. That's what he was known for. One of them was Murray Hallberg, who from New Zealand I think both of the guys were from New Zealand. They were in the all black jerseys, and he was a known commodity, even though everybody knew it was going to be Bannister and Landy here. But that guy was good. That guy was good. Mm-hmm. He was your Abdelhadi El Gider, we'll say, of the time. He's going to be in the race. Okay. You're going to see him, but he's not going to be a factor when the gold medal is decided. But
yeah, he's a supporting actor.
That was sensational. I saw that, and I think that's the moment when I realized we needed to do this rewatch and really dive in, because if that's the first thing you see, what else is going to happen in the next 4 minutes? It could be even better.
In a great race unfolded, I still can't get over the fact there's a couple things. It's the one, it's the guy starting in the down position, and then 2, the comedy of unfortunate events that befell both Bannister and Landy before the race. Bannister having a cold, and then, if you can believe this or not, Landy stomping on a flash bulb, a light bulb of a photographer's camera, and like getting his foot all cut up. This was the Prefontaine jumping into the pool before, or whatever it was, before that became cool. Like, how does that even happen? Talk about a freak accident.
Is that the most 1950s sports injury ever? Can you get more?
Hey, watch out for my camera! Yeah. I just
Press here, press
just
here. John
yeah,
Landy, the
yeah.
fastest miler in the Southern Hemisphere, stepped on a flashbulb. Extra, extra. Read all about it.
It was incredibly expensive too. The photographer invoiced him for $7 afterwards, which was actually all of Landy's winnings for the 1954 season. So it was very expensive accident.
He, yeah, well, he's had to wait less time than Josh Kerr did for his money from
Yeah,
Pro Athletics.
exactly.
Yeah, I did not see stepping on a flashbulb. I did not know about it. I'll admit, I read about this race. That one was one either I read and forgot somehow, which is really, really bad on my part, or I never read it. So he actually had he had stitches. He had stitches, but he did not blame his performance on
That's
the
good.
cut.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pro move. Was it in the injury report? Is what I want to know going in.
Yeah, was he listed as doubtful? I mean, these guys couldn't have backed out. They wouldn't have done that back in this post-war time. I mean, this was not a thing where it's going to be like today. They're on the entry sheet and he scratched, didn't feel, it just wasn't worth the risk. Like, no, they weren't doing that in the 1954s. And like, listen, I love track and field today, and I don't want it to be like it was better back in the 50s. I'm not that take guy, but there wasn't a situation where someone was like, oof, foot's not quite there. I don't want to risk it. 56 is coming up. I really want to be in shape for next season. I got to get in a solid block of training. I'm going to scratch the Empire Games with 35,000. It's just going to be Roger Bannister versus Timmy Two Shoes, and it's going to be a 10-second difference. No, the guy could have taken a shotgun to the arm and he would have still been out there. And like, that's the difference, man. That's just, they made him different back then. These guys were freaking ready to go. And I appreciate that.
This was a non-championship year too. Keep in mind, this might be the greatest non-championship year race until Selinsky went 26:59. This was it. This held the record for most consequential non-championship year race ever. So the gun goes off. Landy, stitches in his foot and all, gives it about 300 meters, and then does the Sifan Hassan screw it.
Yeah. Just takes off. Just takes off.
I mean, he took off the way Alan Webb took off in the world champs on the backstretch with 700 to go, but he did that 300 meters into the race. Do you think his coach thought this coach was probably in the mindset of you need to front run, but hey, dude, how about you chill for just maybe 800 meters and then make the move?
Yeah, his morality wouldn't allow him to do that. I don't think he came from the mindset that he had to earn it from the front, and there was some logic too. The Bannister's kick, very revered, and he shows it in this race. No spoilers, but he was trying to run the kick out of Bannister, and so I don't think he went out too aggressive. I think they said the first quarter mile was like 58 seconds. I mean, obviously, if he would back then, that's on
58.6 Lincoln, according to the splits.
Okay, but I mean, still, he's on like 355, 356 pace. So that
not
was
crazy.
Well, I mean, maybe back then it would have been it was a tad quick with no pacers. So he had a little gap on Bannister, but Bannister knew how to, being the doctor that he was, knew how to measure his effort clearly.
The original master tactician. He also got his PhD in tactics. Before we continue, this made me think the mile. I guess you could put the 5,000 in there as well too, but how many races in history would have been different if everybody just ran their best race strategy? If everybody did the John Landy move, because John Landy's result, you're right. Maybe he goes a tick slower out the gate, but I don't think the ultimate result would have ended any differently. If he ran tactically, he would have lost, and it would have been 402 or something like that, 403. I just wonder how many Olympic finals and world championship races on the men's and women's side would have been different if everybody just employed their best strategy, as opposed to the games that we see oftentimes. If everybody ran like Timothy Cheruiyot could have lost in Doha. Sifan Hassan could have lost those races in Doha. They won by huge margins because they just ran the best strategy for them. They asserted themselves early on, but that's not always the case.
No, not at all. I think a lot of people rely on others to kind of do the work, and I think we think that's a good thing, but in reality, it can be you're just you're trying to
It's
win
good
at
for
somebody
one
else's.
person.
Yeah, you're trying to win at somebody else's game, and that rarely works. And so I think the Landy model, if I was coaching, I'd have my athletes look at the 1950s and say, if you're gonna lose like John Landy. So here, step on your light bulb and get out there. And no, it definitely. I do think that some athletes, and maybe they wouldn't admit this, but do fall into the trap of just waiting to see instead of coming up with a concrete plan that's really gonna work for them. And of course, there's the opposite side of that. There's like the people that were like, oh, you followed this crazy race plan. You went out too aggressively. And I think some people would say that about Landy. It's like, maybe just tone it back just a bit here and you would have had a better shot. But I think Bannister, this was the year of Bannister. I mean, I know Landy broke the world record. And I guess one thing I wasn't clear of, because Bannister does not break the world record here, is how long did Landy have the world record? Because Bannister, this is as fast as Bannister ever runs. So how long was it until somebody broke Landy's record that he set in Finland? I'm putting you on the spot. Sorry.
That's a really good question, Lincoln.
Yeah,
I'm
I don't know.
Not Google
prepared to answer that. Yeah.
Oh, he held it until Landy held it till 57 when Derek Ibbotson of the UK ran 3:57.2.
Oh wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Wait, hold on. That's not right. Because then it says Herb Elliott. Oh, that must just be it. Oh, no, that's right. Yeah, 57. So,
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's like same thing with events right now. They go in cycles, and there's a big chunk of time that gets dropped off, and then it stays put for a couple of years, and there's a whole bunch of time that gets dropped off. Do you think? Well, we'll get to that later. I want to ask more about Bannister and his feeling on just the time. So there is a gap, though. You're right. Landy put some pressure on him. It's not as if he just got in front of him and then stayed put and was leading for no purpose. He was serving essentially as the perfect rabbit here. At about 800, he starts to close the gap, and then with a lap to go, they hit 258.7. Bannister's right on his back right there with 400 to go. Then you're thinking, okay, even if you were in a time machine and you didn't have the benefit of hindsight, you'd think, and you didn't know anything about these guys, you'd say guy in second is in good position here.
Yeah, he just plays it so perfectly. And I mean that's basically it. He knew, if you read, like you mentioned, the perfect mile, the methodical, and it's from his perspective, but it's the methodical thing he put into his races, and you really see it to perfection here with how he times this move perfectly up into the 3/4 miles, and he just owns that last lap. I don't know what the split was, but that his last 100 is God, it's like Robbie Andrews-esque almost.
It was about 60. I would say, because he goes 2:58.7 and then he finishes at 3:58.8, but he was a little bit behind, so just under 60, I would say. Now, Landy, after the race, said this: I had nobody to help me. I tried to run a lone wolf race. If I couldn't shake Roger off, I had to lose. When I looked around in the back straight and I saw he was with me, I knew it was curtains.
It's a great quote.
Right? It's a great quote. It's incredibly honest. He's also perfectly channeling the self-loathing, kickless runner that we all maybe are in our life or know in our life, that are just like, well, can't get rid of him, I'm doomed. You probably don't want that. You don't want that attitude. You do not want that attitude. You want to say, hey, I still have a shot. You can't have just one card in a race, even though what he's saying is 100% true.
Did you see? I don't know when this quote was, and it was from years later, I believe. But so Landy with 120 to go, or maybe 110 to go. He's on the inside lane, but he looks for some reason to his left while Bannister is passing.
Yeah.
Yeah, passing him on his right, and they end up making a statue that they put outside the stadium. I think it's been moved since then, but they put outside the stadium of Bannister going and Landy looking the opposite way. His quote though is so good, where he literally goes biblical. He's like, Lot's wife looked back and she got turned into salt. I looked back and I got turned into bronze, which is just like John Landy is just like, that is just money right there. That is an
He
incredible. Like, he does have that, like, I don't know. It's like self-deprecating, but it's just like it's poetic. He was a wordsmith for sure.
he's a quote machine. Yeah,
Yeah.
he doesn't have the self-confidence of Eliud Kipchoge, but he definitely has the ability to put string words together in that poetry that
Mm-hmm.
that Kipchoge has. Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you mentioned the turnaround. A lot of people made a big deal of it, and the commentary. And I don't know if the commentary was done 10 years later, because if you want to sound like 1950s commentary, you just put your hand over your mic like this. John Landy. So that could have been done anytime. I'm not sure, but they made a huge
That'd be
deal
funny
over
if it was
Landy.
done recently. Sorry, somebody just dubbed
Shout
it
out,
over.
shout out to Scoops Callahan, who probably put it in there. Why was Landy looking left? Did he think he
Yeah,
was cutting through the infield, or did he think he was so far in front that he could look 5 yards behind him that way,
I
as
think he thought
opposed
he was
to
clear. I think he did think he was. He thought he had a little room. It beats me why you would look to the inside. Uh, I have no
don't look at
idea.
all?
I mean, I think it's overrated. Overrated looking. He was going to get past either way.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's like keeping your
he
eyes
looks
open from
early
when
in the
you.
race too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Then,
He was nervous of Raj. He knew old Roger, but yeah, he wasn't gonna. Do this race 100 times. I think Roger Bannister probably wins somewhere in the 80s of this
yeah,
race.
yeah.
The finishing speed was it was like Landy was like a 5K runner without knowing he was actually a 5K runner. Like, good miler,
Mhm.
not great though. Just did not have necessarily that kick. But one thing I want to do before we talk more about the post race, because the race was great, but the post race stuff is where it's really fun. Who had the better career? I mean, listen, Bannister's always going to be the most famous. He was the first guy to do it, and he wins this race. However, Landy has faster 1500 and mile PRs, and he has an Olympic medal, which Bannister does not. I mean, you're taking Bannister's resume. I
Yeah,
mean, you're taking
yeah,
Bannister's publicity that he's got and all the fame and in the revere. But I mean, you could argue that Landy had the better career.
yeah. Bannister also had the European Championship from that same year, which mattered a lot back then because a
Okay.
lot of the sport was centralized in Europe. I still take Bannister. I just think that one achievement overwhelms everything else, even though someone ran faster just a little bit later. You mentioned the 5,000. It made me think 50 years later, 50 years later, there would be a 5,000 at the Olympic Games. And I'm assuming Kenenisa Bekele watched this race, watched this Miracle Mile, and completely did not overlearn the lesson, I'll say. Because there was a guy, he should have run like John Landy,
Mm.
and he didn't. But he probably saw John Landy and he said, that's a front runner, and he got out kicked. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to go against the best miler in history. And you know what I'm going to do in the 5K? I'm going to make that baby tactical, because he
Yeah,
won't see it coming. He'll be so confused by my slow pace, he won't be able to completely whip me in the last lap.
that wasn't Michele's best. That was not his best moment. I mean, to be
Not a good decision.
Yeah, to be fair, I mean, he's done pretty well for himself otherwise, but yeah, not his best. And listen, this top three, can you get any more goaty than the 2004 Olympic 5,000 meters? El Garouge, gold, Bekele, Kipchoge, bronze. I mean, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
That is
Uh,
pretty good.
and
That is
Craig
pretty
Mottram eighth. I mean, has there ever been a better eighth place finisher than Craig Mottram? He's the second coming to
famous.
John Landy. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You could draw a line from him to
yeah.
John Landy. So after the look and the pass, it's curtains, as Landy said. Flies by him, flies by him in the home stretch. Landy holds it together though, right? Because he raced with dignity, Lincoln. He raced with
Mhm.
class. 358.8 to 359.6, as you mentioned, first time 2 people under 4 in the same race. Does not get the world record, though.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they cross the finish line, and what happens? It's a huge race. You got to figure, yes, there's a lot of people in the stands, but there's some sort of decorum. There's some sort of order here. Otherwise, it would be a madhouse. Nope. Just a billion people swarm them as they finish the race.
Yeah.
They pick up Bannister. Was
Who's
it that
dead,
easy
basically.
to get
I mean, because he collapses at every finish line. Yeah.
Was it that easy to get a media credential? Did they think they were going to get like a great soundbite from him?
Mm-hmm.
Just all sorts of people rushed directly
Mm-hmm.
onto the track. And it made me think, pandemic aside, if we got back to a place where we could be really close to people, I'm in favor of post-race swarming. I don't know if you just have maybe every athlete gets 10 people to 15 people that are in a little box near the track. And then if your person wins, they just open the gate and you get to do a post-race swarming along with photographers and people like that. Because this was just immediately, there's a whole bunch of people on the track.
Yeah. Did track and field start the storm the field trend? I mean, I almost wonder here because it was I don't know.
This might have been it.
This might have been it. I know one other thing I want to point out with this era, the finish tape was always a piece of dental floss. Why they did that?
That's actually how they invented dental floss. It got tested out first as a finishing tape, and someone accidentally caught it on their tooth when they were crossing the line, and it worked. So then that is how they decided to integrate dental floss into a dentist regimen. A lot of people don't know that.
Oh man, so much fun. We'll go to the post-race interview with
yes,
Bannister. So we think of greats who have worn oversized clothing in the modern era: Jeffrey Carui in Boston in 2017, Lalisa DeCisa in his massive singlet at the Breaking 2 event. Bannister's sweats, not only does he of course have a collar on, but I think you wrote they're about 7 times too big. What do we think was going on with those sweats?
It was hard to tell what exactly was going on, but it looked like they belonged to a small family because you could fit numerous people in there. And they mentioned before, I saw some article saying how hot it was outside, so there was no reason to be wearing all that clothing. And they interview him, and the guy literally asks if it was the fastest time he's ever run.
He's so professional too. Like he looks so professional, and then it's yes.
Do you remember when Mo Farah got interviewed? Remember when Mo Farah got interviewed after the Rock and Roll New Orleans half marathon, and the woman asked if he had ever run one before? This is so many times worse than that. You're at the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah,
you have the first interview with Roger Bannister. The guy literally broke 4 3 months before. He's the most famous runner on the planet. You don't have to go to his TFERS page or his Teal Stoppagia page. There's one result you need to know for Roger Bannister and one result you need to know for John Landy. They asked him if it was the fastest time he's run.
Yeah.
He just ran 3:59.4.
Bannister, aside from having a smoker's cough here because he's getting over a cold, he answers it with quite the professionalness. He also asked him if it's easier to run it's easier. Is it easier to run fast in a time trial by yourself or with opponents? And of course, now we would scoff at that, be like, obviously with other people in the race, but Bannister still answers that like in the British, with British kindness, and I admire that. Other than the fact that he's clearly suffering because he's getting over a cold and just coughing the entire time,
not covering his mouth either. In 2020, you watch that and you just go like, man, where's your mask, man? Where's your mask? So Landy's foot stitches versus Bannister's cough. Is that a wash? What would you rather have going into a mile race?
Those are such different ailments. I mean, Landy, like I said, Landy could have taken a discus to the dome and he would not have used that as an excuse during the race. That's just the way he was with the media. But I guess we could call it a wash. I don't see him favoring the foot at all. And then Bannister, I mean, he still ran 3:58, so I assume he was okay. It was a PR. Yeah, I think it's pretty close to being neutral, drawing neutral, just based on what they said and how they performed.
Both guys in their mid-20s, Landy 24, Bannister 25, but this was really the highlight. As I mentioned, they get the statue, as you said, which you can still find somewhere in Vancouver. There should be a statue of the guys starting in sprinter starts. That should be right
Yes.
next to them.
Yes.
Landy wins the bronze in 56. Bannister wins Euro champs in that same year in 54, and that's it for him. There was only a couple, so this was it. I mean, it in that sense, it lives up to the title, the Miracle Mile of the Century. I mean, Mile of the Century. When you're in the middle of the century, that's bold.
That's very
if
bold.
If it was 1998 and there was an awesome mile, you could be like, this is the mile of the century.
Yeah.
Does it live up? Does it hold up? Do you think? Was this the mile of the century? In fact, we'll just say it for the men's side of things.
I mean, is it? Let's just say, like, what is the most? If someone was like, "What's the most memorable mile?" It obviously is going to depend on where you're from. I don't know what Americans would say. I mean, I would tend to think an easy one would go, "Oh, you go to El Garouge's world record," or you go to the 2015 Sir Walter Miler. I mean, that was a classic, of course. No, I'm just kidding.
I still think it's Bannister's first one.
Bannister's first of four. Yeah, that's probably the mile of the century. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so what's the mile of this century so far? 20 years in.
Ooh. Wow, that's tough. I mean, Yomi Kajelka's solo 347 is up there. The mile of this century. Can the 1500s be included or just the mile?
I think it doesn't have to be the mile.
Okay. God, there's not a ton that it's like you don't want to put like, oh, the Bowerman Mile one year went 347. It's like, who cares? I mean, that's fun, but see, I don't have a run of Husky invites on my brain. That's where I really need to be diving into. I can't. No, I'm just kidding. The best mile. God,
doesn't need to be the best. Just what's the mile of the century
so far? 20 years in. I don't know. I mean, to me, as an American, Alan Webb's 353 in high school was pretty big. I know he didn't win that, but that stands out as one, and that was literally in 2001 or something.
Well, if you want to talk Webb, other than El Garouge,
I mean his American record, yeah,
right. He's the fastest. He's the fastest one. Garouge did some. In 2000 and 2001 ran some 345s and 344s and 346s, but then it's Webb's 346.
Can you
91? What if you did include
344 in a mile? Like so fast.
What if you did include 1500s though? What if we do include the named metric mile? I would say 04. Yeah. I would say 04. Garouge finally getting the gold would be mine on the men's side of things.
Yeah.
For the women, for the women, I'm partial, and maybe we can do a rewatchable later on in this week, because I think you and I are on again on Thursday or Friday or something like that. I love the 2017 Women's World Championships. That race was so cool. I mean, I guess you could talk about Dababa's 350, 1500, but that's not that interesting. I mean, she just she blitzes the world record. That's what it is. I don't know. Like, if we're gonna go fat, just a pure fast time, I would say this past year's World Championships to me is more interesting than the world record, even though it's a little faster.
So. Yeah. No, definitely. I was gonna say 2019 was pretty good as well. Women's race. I think I do think 2017 with all the names. I know we just in the week, but all the names that were in there, that one's tough to beat with all the greats you're going to eventually have in that race.
Yeah, Kipyegon, Simpson, Semenya, Muir, Hassan, Dababa, who got last, but just ignore that for now.
It's fine. It's fine.
That's sixes.
She was tuning up for indoor season. Okay, she was getting ready for indoors.
All right. So any last thoughts on the Miracle Mile, the mile of the century?
I just encourage everyone to watch it, to look at sports pre-pandemic, and track and field has been great for a long time. It's weird to think of that many people being interested in a Commonwealth type games, but I think it's one of the I don't know, it's a cool thing. A lot of events can draw people's attention. And I think the quirky stuff and the very old school stuff we mentioned, the two guys starting the down position, I think you'll find it very entertaining. But a good race is a good race, and the historical stuff pushes this over the edge. And I think we can celebrate this while acknowledging that you can call it the race of the century in the sense that we're probably never going to see something with that level of stakes, with two guys that are like going to meet one time basically, or once or twice.
Yeah.
I mean, that we just don't see that, because the Diamond League wasn't a thing, the World Championships weren't a thing. If you're that good now and as a runner you're going to be a full-time professional, you're not going to be like Bannister trying to be a doctor and retiring after your best season. That would be like Centro calling it quits after 2016 to go, work as a DJ or something. It just doesn't happen anymore. So there's a lot there to appreciate.
I think Landy thought, and now I'm putting words and thoughts into his mouth, but he had the world record. He needed the victory over Bannister to complete his resume. A gold medal in the Olympics would have helped even more, but I think he wanted that. He wanted that from the perspective of, okay, this guy beat me to it, but I'm going to do it better once I'm there. And if he could have broken the world record again there, say he runs 3:57.5, which looked like that's the type of time he was targeting and he thought he could do, then he's really cement his legacy. Yeah. I don't know if we would be talking about John Landy still, but in the running, like as a important figure, as a pioneer in the same way as Bannister, but he at least would have been, you could have made that contrarian opinion known to your non-track friends who bring up Roger Bannister, and you can say, well, actually John Landy. But I think with this, Bannister showed just how good he was, just showed that he could win. He could do it in both styles. And he showed he could do it while wearing 7X sweats afterwards and having a cold.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for John Landy, we don't talk about who the best astronaut is of all time. We talk about, at least in the United States, we say, Neil Armstrong, first man on the moon. And so that's where he's at. That's the deficit he's at with in respect to Bannister. But I think
you don't have your
on the side
ranked?
of Landy. Yeah, it's a ranking. Right there, Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong. I think Landy understood his spot, but he needed it for himself to say, I gave it a shot at Bannister, and he took it, and he took his loss, and he said, well, that's it. I'll never be the best. Time to do it a couple more years and call it a career, and go back to self-mockery in Australia.
We're lucky. We're fortunate that the first person who unofficially broke 2 hours in the marathon is also the undisputed best marathoner of all time. There is no question about that. Mm-hmm. Perhaps somebody will break it in an official capacity that is not going to turn into the greatest of all time, and that will become a little complicated. But I think people, the common public, will recognize Kipchoge as the first person to do it, just because they saw it and they don't really care too much about all the little rules.
Yeah, I would hope so. That's it. I just, pros now, they have it easy. They get sweats that fit. They aren't asked to race when they get their foot chopped up by a light bulb and or have a horrific cough. And it has me wishing for a bygone era. Has me wishing for an era of my grandparents' adolescence. It just was a good time.
Well, let us know, FloTrackPodcast@gmail.com. What's the most memorable 1,500-mile race in history? We'd love to read your thoughts, because it is My Other Week. We got the Alan Webb film and the Alan Webb race up on the site, and then we're going to have the Jenny Simpson film coming later on this week. Thank you to Alon for producing this episode. Thank you to Lincoln for co-hosting. We will talk to you guys tomorrow.